We all feel the pinch at the grocery store. And if you're health conscious, you know that most of the food in the store is not good for you. I'm talking about the packaged, ultra processed food and the hormone injected meats. As we age, doing everything we can to stay healthy becomes more and more important. So while we didn't care so much about all the ingredients and preservatives that were in our packaged foods in our 20s, it's kind of cringy now to think about ingesting things that are unnatural. So let's talk about how you can save money on healthy food, even if you're just buying for one person or for a couple. In this video, I'm going to talk more about 5 ways that I'm personally saving money on healthy food in midlife. I'm hoping that some of these tips can help you in your endeavor to do the same. I am a single over 60 person, and these are the 5 ways that as a single midlife person, I'm saving money on food. Let's get to it. Tip number one is to buy in bulk. When I had kids at home, I always bought in bulk. And then after they left home, I believe that there's no reason for me to buy in bulk. I mean, things are going to go bad by the time I eat it. What do I need with a giant container of mushrooms or vegetables? And mostly that's what I'm buying is not packaged food, but produce and things that need to be eaten more quickly, right? So I discarded the idea of buying in bulk. And for a complete decade, I didn't. And I just bought what I needed weekly or daily, to cook for one, which is really hard to do, by the way. I'm going to get to that a little bit more later. But in recent years, I've discovered a new way of looking at buying in bulk and how it can really save money, even if you're just one person or two people. First off, we can preserve those foods that we buy in bulk. We don't have to eat it all. So we can buy in bulk and then preserve those foods for a later date. The thing to think about when it comes to food is those costs are never going to get cheaper. We know from when the pandemic happened that when costs went up in food during the pandemic, they never really came back down. A few items might have come back down, but not really. And now, people are kind of like, oh, tariffs, tariffs. Tariffs are making the food prices go up. They'll come back down when we don't have tariffs. That's not likely to happen. We know we can look at history and we know that in recent history, the costs just continue to go up. So anything that you can buy today at a cheaper cost, 5 years from now, you're saving money because you bought it at a lower cost today, if you still have it 5 years from now. There are various ways to preserve, and we don't usually think 5 years out because most of the ways that we preserve are only good for a year or 18 months. That still saves you money because it's probably going to be cheaper now than 18 months. It also provides some convenience to you as well. But some of the ways that you can preserve is with a freezer. You can freeze items, or you can buy a separate deep freeze if you want to. You can can foods, and you can learn to can at any age. You can dehydrate foods, and then you can freeze dry foods, which I'm going to talk a lot more about in tip number 3 in a couple of minutes. But freeze drying, you can save foods for up to 20 years, which this has been kind of a game changer for me and why buying in bulk has become much easier. Even if you don't want to preserve foods, you can buy bulk goods that are dry goods. So things that are shelf stable that are going to last a long time. So for example, I have been using the same protein powder in my smoothies for at least 10 years. So if I can purchase that by the case in bulk, it's going to be cheaper per ounce than it would be if I'm just buying a container at a time. So anytime you can do that. Same types of things with laundry soap, or, the cost per ounce goes down on most bulk items that are shelf stable as you buy more of it. So if you're buying by the case, you're going to save money than if you're buying one individual item at a time. Some other things, grains, flours, beans, those types of things are pretty shelf stable for years, so you don't need to worry about that. Meats and produce, I already kind of talked about produce and all the different ways that you could preserve that. Same goes with meats. There are a variety of ways to preserve meats. If you can get those cheaper by buying in bulk, for example, at Costco, I bought a package of tilapia and it had 12 fillets. I'm one person, those are going to go to freeze that whole 12 fillets that doesn't make sense. So the first thing I do is I repackage those and put two fillets into a package into freezer bags and store them in the freezer that way so I can just grab a bag when I'm ready to cook, ready to have tilapia for the week. That's buying in bulk. That's tip number one. Now, a comparable or similar one is tip number two is to buy in season and or on sale. I'm sure by this time of your life, you know to buy on sale. But the buy in season thing, I had to kind of change my perspective there because in recent years, you can pretty much get anything at any time of the year. So whatever it is that I want, produce or otherwise, it seems like I can usually get it at the grocery store. What happens is you quit paying attention to the price. You just start thinking, "Oh, I want it," and you quit paying attention to the price of that. But when you're at a stage of life where you're thinking about saving money and how can I make the most out of the money that I have, one of the ways that you can do that is to buy more in season. For example, peaches. Last year, I had just moved to a new location and I knew that a truckload of peaches would come in from Colorado, or I think that's where they were from, Colorado grown peaches. I think I bought 4 boxes of peaches at the time. They're much cheaper when you're buying that many peaches and also when you're buying them in season. So then I took those peaches and I preserved them in a variety of ways, made jams, I froze some, made some different treats, peach snack bites and freeze dried those. All different ways I preserved these peaches because I was able to get them cheap in season. Another example of this, not necessarily in season, but on sale, is my local grocery store has bananas on sale every Thursday right now. I don't know how long this will go on, but every Thursday for 18 cents a pound. I think they're normally maybe 59 cents a pound. I buy a ton of bananas on Thursdays. I freeze some of them for my smoothies that I like to have during the summer. I always have a smoothie in the summer. And then I use my freeze dryer to make banana chips, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I not only have those chips for snacks, but I also sell them. I'm able to buy those bananas on sale and then turn those around and turn them into income, which was an unexpected benefit of the freeze dryer. I wasn't expecting to do that, but it worked out that way. Another example is pumpkin. I use pumpkin year round. I have a dog and I make our treats, or I make his treats. And I always put pumpkin in those treats. And pumpkin can be pretty hard to come by out of season. So I really stock up in season and buy a lot of canned pumpkin and get it at a good price so that I don't have to pay more in other times. And then the last example of this buy in season or on sale is peas. I did find for the first time, I came up with a recipe for my freeze dryer to make these pea snacks that were crunchy like chips and had the right seasoning. And I was so excited I'd come up with this. And then I couldn't find any peas anywhere in town. And for the whole winter, I've not been able to find peas. So one thing that I'm doing in this case is I'm going to grow a lot of peas this year. And also I'm going to buy as many sweet peas as I can when they are in season so I can make a ton of those snacks and have them year round. And I'll talk more about that in tip number 3 as well. So tip number 2 is to buy in season or on sale. You will save a ton of money. You don't think much about the difference between 18 cents a pound and 59 cents a pound. But if it's a food that you use a lot of or that you can preserve in some way for a later time, it all adds up. And that takes me to tip number 3, which is the freeze dryer and other preservation methods. When we buy dry goods at the store, I think that we're always kind of thinking of buying just enough to last no more than a year because even shelf stable foods have an expiration date. And so we're always kind of thinking, yeah, if I'm not going to use it in the next year or 18 months, then I'll probably have to throw it out. So at least that's how I'm thinking when I think of canned goods or shelf stable goods. I have to tell you that purchasing a freeze dryer was a complete game changer for me, not only for produce and meats and meals, but for canned goods. And I'll explain all of that here in a second. A freeze dryer is a hefty investment. I will give you that. It's about $2,000 for a small freeze dryer. I have no kickbacks for saying anything about the freeze dryer I have. I'm not, obviously I'm not monetized or anything as I'm making this video. But I think I purchased mine from Harvest Right. They're kind of the go-to place for freeze dryers. You can get them on sale, I think, for maybe 1,700 or 1,800 sometimes. I have a small freeze dryer somewhere around the $2,000 range, which that sounds like a lot because you can get a dehydrator for 50 bucks, from Amazon. So it feels like a huge amount of investment, but man, I think it probably has paid for itself in the first 6 months for me. And it all depends on how you're going to use it. I purchased a freeze dryer because I wanted to be able to create my own food. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about gardening, but I'm an avid gardener. I grow a lot of my own food. I wanted a way to preserve it, and I personally don't enjoy canning. I don't, and I'm going to talk about each of these other methods and the other methods that we have for storing food and preserving food. I just didn't love them all. And so I had done a lot of research on freeze drying. And one of the things that hit me most is freeze dried food can store for, they say up to 25 years. I usually say about 20. I figure if I still have food 20 years from now, wow, that's crazy. So 20 years, just think about that. So you no longer have to think about I've got to use it in the next 18 months or I've got to use it in the next 6 months if it's in the freezer or a year, 20 years you can have food that is freeze dried and still completely able to eat. So yeah, that's probably the rest of my lifetime or pretty close to it. I'm talking about fruits, vegetables, complete meals, snacks. I mean, it's amazing what I can freeze dry and what I have been freeze drying. I'm going to show them to you here in a second. Having a freeze dryer allows me to buy a lot of a certain food when it's in season or cheap. And it also allows me to not have to cook for one. I can make a big pot of chili and I can freeze dry all that I'm not going to eat and have it for a month from now or for next winter. I can take entire meals and freeze dry them. Same goes for anything that is on sale. Like I mentioned the banana chips previously. So before I get into more about the freeze drying, I'm going to show you some examples of things that I freeze dried. Let's talk about the other ways that you can preserve foods and the pros and cons of each of those ways. So first is canning. Canning is cheap to get into. There's not a high cost. Water bath canning is pretty easy. If you're canning meat and things like that, then you need the pressure canner. And I don't think it's too hard to get used to doing. Anytime that you can food, I think most people want to eat any canned food within 2 years. I think that's kind of the going thing, 18 months to 2 years. Also, whenever you're canning, it involves heat. So the heat actually impacts the food that's being canned. You do lose a little of the nutritional content of the food by canning it just from the heat. Anytime we apply heat to any sort of food product, it's going to decrease the nutritional value of that food. Not drastically. And canning it's cheap, it's easy to get into. Lots of people do canning and love it. It keeps things shelf stable for a long time. Another method, I already talked about freezer, so I'm not going to talk about that again. It's just you can repackage your food, stick it in the freezer. The things I don't like about the freezer is obviously you get the frost on the food, and then you always have to worry about, I got to use this up because it's starting to get freezer burn. The life cycle of the food, you have to kind of watch it to make sure that you don't end up having to toss that food because it got freezer burn. The next one is dehydrating, and there's a lot of confusion, I think, between dehydrating and freeze drying. So dehydrating actually uses low heat to dehydrate the food and take a lot of the moisture content out of it. You can also dehydrate in your oven. You don't have to have a separate dehydrator to use. You're just applying low heat over a long period of time. I have a dehydrator. I've used a dehydrator. Dehydrators are cheap to get started. You can cook lots of things in the dehydrator. You can put vegetables and fruits in the dehydrator and store those. I don't know what the shelf life is for items that have been dehydrated. If you happen to know that, you can put it in the comments down below so that we all know that. My personal experience with a dehydrator is that I don't like how the food tastes when it's rehydrated. So I have found that a lot of the vegetables, for example, are a little bit rubbery when they're rehydrated instead of, some things are really good dehydrated. For example, corn in a dehydrator is really good, and you don't have to it's a really good snack, like just eat it by the handful. A lot of things like carrots, for example, if I dehydrate carrots and then I go to rehydrate them, even if I put them in a stew or something, I find that they taste a little rubbery. The texture has changed, and that something happens with the texture during that process. For me, dehydrating is a way to preserve, but it's not my favorite, and I do have a dehydrator. I mostly use it now for herbs. It's really good for fruit roll-ups or for jerky. Those are some things that I really like to use my dehydrator for. So that's dehydrating. Now, freeze drying has no heat, except if you pre-cook the foods or you blanch the vegetables first. And so because it doesn't apply heat, it's not impacting the nutritional value. Now, I will say almost all the vegetables that I cook in the dehydrator, not all, but a lot of them, I will, or not the dehydrator, the freeze dryer, I will blanch them first, especially if I'm trying to make a snack out of them. Or potatoes, for example. If you don't blanch them first, they'll turn black, and you don't want that. If I'm making snacks like a pea snack where I want it to be like a crisp potato chip, I will blanch them first. So I am applying heat in that case, and that's taking out some of the nutritional content. But the freeze dryer itself doesn't apply heat. Now, freeze drying, I don't think it's not good for every kind of food, but let me show you some of the things that I love about the freeze dryer and why I say that it paid for itself. Even though it's a hefty cost, it's more than paying for itself really quickly. The first thing I'm going to talk about is snacks. Now, for me, I love snacks, and I especially love potato chips. And so I was trying to find a healthy way to make some of my own healthy snacks without, so that I wouldn't eat potato chips, but I wanted them to have that crunch of the potato chip. So one of the things that I found is the freeze dryer allows me to do that with both fruits and vegetables. But for example, I'm going to show you a few. These are banana chips. They are crunchy. The freeze dryer takes all the moisture out, and that's why it's able to save them for 20 years. These are banana chips. If I shake the jar, hopefully you can hear how dry they are. So when you eat a banana chip, it is crunchy like a chip, and it crunches just the same. These are also really great dipped in like a yogurt. I would never take these and pour water on them and try to rehydrate them as banana and then eat them that way. I suppose you could if you wanted to, and turn it into a banana pudding or however you wanted to do that. You could do that with, but I use these as just a snack for chips. So here's a jar of apples. And same kind of thing. They are crunchy. I take these sometimes and I'll sprinkle some cinnamon on them before I put them in the freeze dryer. And they're just like eating chips, but they're apples. And they they taste so good, and they taste just like an apple. They just don't have all the water, so all the water is out of them, and they're shelf stable for years. So if I buy apples in bulk or bananas in bulk, I just chop them up and freeze dry them, and I put them in containers, put them on the shelf, and I have them for future state. Another example would be vegetable snacks. So I already mentioned the peas. I also have a green bean snack that I made, and it's the same kind of thing. I blanch the green beans or I blanch the peas. I put seasoning on them, and they taste just like a chip, but they're green beans. And I'm sure there's lots of other vegetables that you could use to make these snacks. In addition to that, oh, you're going to love this one. So here's a snack. This is not a healthy snack. These are actually ice cream sandwiches. So ice cream sandwiches cut up into little bites, and they're completely dry, shelf stable. I can put these in a baggie, and if I'm on a road trip, I can snack on these. And they don't have to be frozen. They don't have to be refrigerated. I don't have to worry about if the power goes out, and I still have ice cream snacks. But again, those are not healthy, but it's a fun one. Okay, I've mentioned a couple of times about the unintended side benefit of me making these freeze-dried snacks. And what happened was I started sharing my snacks with friends and neighbors. Whenever I was like at a book club meeting, I might bring some snacks, and people started asking to buy bags of my snacks. So now I also have these Mylar bags. This is a bag of banana chips. I sell these for $5 per bag, and then that also helps to pay for my snacks. And that was an unintended benefit. I didn't buy the freeze dryer to try to make a business out of it, but it has turned out that I'm selling a lot of those bags. Also, if I'm conscious about taking some snacks to an event and then I happen to have 20 bags in my car, I will sell all 20 bags at that event, which is nice. So, an unintended side benefit of my freeze dryer. Some of the other ways I use a freeze dryer is that I freeze dry just vegetables that I want to cook with later. As a single person, it's hard to buy, let's say, a container of mushrooms. I love mushrooms in my foods, but if I buy a container of mushrooms, it is really hard for me to use the whole container, especially if I buy in bulk at Costco, right? And I get a big container of mushrooms. Really hard to use that. I can freeze dry an entire container of mushrooms or several containers and use them when I need to. Now, in this case, I'll want to rehydrate them. So I'll just add a little bit of warm water to the mushrooms that I want to use to rehydrate them. Or if I'm putting them in a soup or stew, I don't need to add, that fluid will help to reconstitute them. Same goes for onions. I have jars and jars of onions that I can use for cooking. So if I'm cooking something up and I don't happen to have an onion in the fridge, I've got some on the shelf, right? And then the next thing that I use, and also I hadn't thought about this when I got the freeze dryer, is powders. And at the time I thought, what would I do with powders? But let me show you a few. This is lemon powder. This is made from lemons, and I juiced the lemons, and then I put it in the freeze dryer. It took all the moisture out, turned it into a powder. Well, I can use this for lots of things. I can use lemon powder to help flavor anything that I want to have a lemony flavor to. I can make my own lemonade. I can make my own spices and seasonings that have a lemon twist to them. So I can use it for a variety of ways and constitute it just by adding a little bit liquid to it. Here's another example. This is tomato powder. So what's great about tomato powder, sometimes I'll buy cans of tomato sauce in bulk at Costco, and then I'll put it in the freeze dryer and turn it into a powder. Why? Because it'll last longer as a powder. It'll last up to 20 years. If it's in a can, it won't last that long. With tomato powder, I can turn it into a paste if I need tomato paste. I can add a little bit more water, turn it into tomato sauce. I can even turn it into tomato juice with even more water added to it. So lots of ways that I can use that. I've got orange powder, same kind of thing. I can turn it into orange flavoring if I want to add it to any sort of cookies or muffins or anything like that, or I can make orange juice out of it. And I do it with vegetables as well. So broccoli is a great antioxidant, really great anti-cancer fighting. I try to get broccoli in every single day. And one of the ways that I use this broccoli powder is I just put a spoonful or two into my morning smoothies. It's a great way for me to get my vegetables in a variety of ways. Because in the summer, I don't like to cook. I just like to have smoothies. And so having this in a powder form is just an easy way for me to get my vegetables in. Okay, that's all of that. Oh, yeah, the last one is entire meals. This is chicken noodle soup. I can do the same with chili. I have jars and jars of beef stew. I have pasta dishes. One of the things that I found about the freeze dryer is it's really good for chicken, for freeze drying any meal that has chicken or beef in it. I don't have as much luck with other meats. Like I don't think it doesn't do very well with fish. It doesn't do very well with even turkey, or I haven't had good luck with turkey. But anything that has a chicken or beef and fat, anything with a lot of fat or oil, it doesn't do good with. Those are some ways that I use my freeze dryer. One of the many things I love about it is the added benefit is I like to do a lot of outdoor activities. I like to hike in the summer, go on hiking trips. And also I take a lot of road trips. And one of the things I hate about road trips is gas station food. I hate gas station food, and I'm usually traveling with a dog. So this is just an easy way for me to take healthy snacks and meals with me along the way, even in these Mylar bags. All I have to do is add some hot water. If I have a meal in here, I just have to add some hot water, which I can take a thermos with me, or I could pick up some at a gas station, pour it in, and I've got a meal. So I don't have to eat gas station food. That's a lot about the freeze dryer. You can tell that I'm really excited about it. This has been a game changer for me as far as decreasing my food bill by being able to buy in bulk and be able to store this food for long term. I'm really excited about this. Before I get to the last two tips, let me remind you to check the description down below for additional tools and videos related to this topic. And I also am putting out a weekly newsletter on Substack, and I've got the link in the description for that today. You can go there and sign up and get that weekly newsletter. And hey, thanks so much for watching, especially if you've stuck around this long. If you have any questions about the freeze dryer, you want to learn more about it, you can put that in the comments below as well. Okay, tip number 4 is to cook at home. I mean, we know this, right? This is not new information. We know to cook at home, but here's what happens. As a single person, it became difficult for me to cook at home. So I found myself buying takeout or buying meals for one, even at the deli at the grocery store, or buying high-end items like even soup already prepared, which was $6 for a serving. At home, I could have cooked an entire pot of soup for that amount, probably. Cooking at home really can save a lot of money. It can become really easy to buy takeout when you're one person. But when you have ways to preserve your food, and it does take more time to cook at home, but it's also way healthier for you. You know exactly what's going into that food. You're not having to worry about, oh, what did they put in here? What ingredients did they put in this? And it's just so much better for you and saves a lot of money to cook at home. You can even make your own bread at home. I make my own dog treats from home now. Dog treats are really expensive, and dog food is expensive too. So I do my best to make some healthy treats. Do still buy dog food and it gets a topper, on top of that. But anyways, the unexpected benefit for me of cooking at home is I don't really like takeout anymore. I find that when I do get takeout, I can taste just the grossness of it. It just doesn't taste like I'm getting a good meal, which is good because we shouldn't be eating most of that crap anyways. Okay, that's tip number 4. Tip number 5 is to grow your own. I grow a lot of my own food. One of the primary ways that I decrease my food budget is by growing a lot of my own produce. And I eat a lot of produce. I don't eat a lot of packaged food, so growing my own food has really helped. Now, I can say that gardening is a science experiment every single year, and that's one of the reasons I love it. Different environment, different weather patterns, different dirt, everything that is different adds to that complexity of how things are going to go when you're growing. And I just find it really fun to kind of play that game, play that science experiment. One of the things that I do is I start my seeds at home. So I buy a package of seeds. Now, depending on what kind of seeds you're getting anywhere from 50 to 300 seeds for $4 or $5. So you can grow a lot of spinach with 500 seeds or a lot of tomatoes or a lot of whatever it is that you're purchasing with those seeds. Yeah, it's really satisfying to think about the amount of money that I'm saving by just using seeds. Right now, I've got a rack in the basement that has some lights on it. They aren't even proper grow lights. They're like shop lights that I've attached to a rack. And I have seeds started down there for a variety of things. And in addition to seeds, you can even start your own food from store-bought food. So one of the things that I have in the basement right now is I had bought some onions, to cook with over the last few months. And then I just cut off the ends and put them in water and they sprouted. And so now I have onion plants that I will transplant outside just as soon as I'm ready. Same thing goes with potatoes, sorry. Same thing goes with potatoes. And potatoes, sometimes under the best of conditions, they will start to sprout. Well, those now have become seed potatoes and I will plant them in the yard. I love sweet potatoes. So I have a bunch of sweet potato starts just based on one sweet potato that I purchased that sprouted. And I started taking the sprouts and putting them in water. And now I have this whole collection of available sweet potato slips to plant in my garden. So we'll see how that goes in the experiment this year. One of the things I love about growing my own food is it takes away the concern about what pesticides have been put on this, how has it been grown, what was in the soil, how was it handled. I don't have to worry about any of that because I know all of that if it's coming from my own yard. The other thing I want to say about gardening is you don't have to have a big yard. You can garden on a deck. I have a couple of planters that I purchased for this year just for that purpose on my deck that are called green stalks, and you can look that up. I'm not sponsored or anything by Greenstock. You can also purchase garden towers if you just Google that term. And what you can do is you can have 7 layers of plants in one unit, or you can use just pots that you have around the house, put them in a sunny window, or put them out on your patio when the danger of frost is past. I have grown spinach in pots. I have grown all kinds of flowers, of course, in pots. I've grown tomatoes, I've grown peas, all in pots. So you can grow a lot on a patio or a deck. Just anything that you can grow yourself, you're just saving that much money from having to purchase it at the store. So I try to focus on things that I like to eat, that I want to eat, that I want to have handy and at the ready, and that I'm most concerned about pesticides. It's funny for me, I don't worry as much about like regular potatoes because they're grown in ground and they don't usually have a lot of pesticides. But I don't eat a lot of potatoes. I eat a lot of sweet potatoes, but I don't eat a lot of like russet potatoes. So anyways, buy the seeds of plants that you like to eat and just start out with something. One of the things that I love growing is strawberries. I could never get enough strawberries. And so I think I have a whole raised bed dedicated, and then I have my green stalk. I'm going to have a bunch of strawberries in there as well. I'm trying all kinds of things in my green stalk this year that I'm really looking forward. I'll report back to that. Growing your own is just another way to save money on groceries. Like I mentioned, I have some plants, some seedlings already started in the basement. It's February as I record this, and I have some herbs such as oregano and rosemary and spearmint already growing. I also have some vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, salad greens, kale, all of that is started, and spinach. And I even have some flowers already started. And next week, I think I'll start my peas. So all of the cool season plants are kind of started in trays down in the basement right now, and then I'll move them outside just as soon as I can. And then as it gets warmer, next month or the month after, I'll start the warmer season plants like tomatoes and cucumbers and all of those things. It's a great way to grow some of your own things. Okay, those are 5 ways that I am saving money on food this year. I know that those are not all the ways to save money on food this year. So, what did I miss? What are you doing to save money on healthy food for this year? Let me know down in the comments below. And again, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.